Hello, and welcome to this discussion where we will focus on international marketing. And we'll take a relatively broad perspective when it comes to international marketing. There are actually uh, people who split hairs about what's called multinational marketing, global marketing, and international marketing. And while there might be or there can be a difference between the three of those concepts. We're just going to use those concepts interchangeably. And for us, what international marketing or multinational marketing or global marketing is going to mean is when a company markets its products in multiple countries, particularly countries that are outside its domestic market. So there's lots of examples of multinational marketing, international business, whatever. Coca-Cola, for example. Coca-Cola is headquartered in the United States, but you can buy Coca-Cola products in many, many countries throughout the world. Toyota is an automobile manufacturer. Toyota's headquarters are in Japan. You can buy Toyota automobiles in a number of countries around the world. So those are just two of many examples of international business and therefore international marketing. And um, one of the reasons to talk about this particular topic is that we live in a very different world than when I was your age. There's much more trade between countries now than there used to be. And so to give you an example, approximately 25% of the world's commerce is accounted for by international trade. And international trade isn't going to go away. There's a group of people who would like it to go away, but it's not going to go away. And the projections are that international trade will grow at approximately 3% per year through the rest of this particular decade. And all you have to do is start looking at labels of products that you have to get a sense for maybe how dependent you are, perhaps not even being aware of it, of international trade and hence international marketing. So for example, my lovely pair of sunglasses here, style and profile. My lovely pair of sunglasses was made in China. My wonderful computer bag was made in China, right? And those are just two of many examples. If you have an iPhone, like I do, chances are it was made in China. And that's another thing that I'd like to point out is that, when I was your age, if you had told me that the People's Republic of China, which everybody refers to as China, there's also the Republic of China, which is Taiwan, right? Republic of China is Taiwan. But if you'd have told me that the People's Republic of China would be the U.S.'s second largest trading partner. If you'd have told me when I was your age that the People's Republic of China would be the U.S.'s second largest trading partner, I would have looked at you and wondered what kinds of legal and or illegal substances you were consuming. There was no trade between the U.S. and China, and in a period of roughly 40 years. The People's Republic is now the second largest trading partner for the United States, and that's not likely to change a great deal as we go forward. So, international trade's here. International trade isn't going anywhere. And before we get to the two main topics, that I'm going to discuss here. One of the things I'm going to suggest to you, particularly those of you who don't have a passport, get a passport. As I pointed out a few minutes ago, the world that you live in is much different than the world that I grew up in. There's a very interconnected world. You're likely, if you have a business career, you're likely to do business in multiple countries. You may be required to travel to multiple countries, and kind of the sooner you get a passport and the sooner you start experiencing what it's like to just go to other countries, the more you're going to learn, and kind of the better business person that you're going to be. Now, if you're looking for suggestions, I would recommend that you get a passport, obviously, and then go to London. London's a great city. I taught in the Bowler School program. You might be aware that the Bowler School has a study abroad program in London, generally done second semester of your sophomore year. And I taught in that program 2007, 2008. Great experience. London's a wonderful city. The reason I recommend London is because London you won't be totally uncomfortable because they speak English. There's a lot of things that you'll recognize when you go to London. London has McDonald's, and London has Burger King, and London has Subway, and Subway, the eating place. They also have the Tube, the Subway, the Underground, Starbucks. I mean, you name it, London has it. But London's also very diverse from a cultural perspective. One of the reasons, for example, that United Kingdom and London in particular got the 2012 Summer Olympics was because more than 300 languages are spoken in the London metropolitan area. So you can get exposed to a lot of different cultures, a lot of different languages by going to London. Just an excellent opportunity for you. So get a passport if you don't already have a passport. Okay. All right. Say, okay, that's great. You've taken up 7 minutes. I haven't learned a damn thing. Okay. So you've got to get to the two major topics, and the two major topics that we'll look at is we'll look at macro-environmental factors, and we will also take a look at marketing mix with respect to one of the things that we talk about in the macro in the macro-environmental discussion. So we're going to look again, and we're going to look at the macro-environmental factors from the PEST framework that I described in the initial lecture. And PEST again is political, economic, social, sociocultural, and technological. So we'll start with political, and one of the considerations with respect to political, and again we're going to look at these factors or components individually, but there's interrelationships among them, so that something going on with one of the macro-environmental factors can have an impact on one or other of the macro-environmental factors. And political, P, is a real good example of that, because a lot of times political feelings towards international business can have ramifications for economic policy. So you might have heard, for example, in the past month, 2 months, that there was all this stuff going on in the U.S. Congress and with President Obama over the Trans-Pacific Partnership, a multi-national trade agreement among countries in the Pacific Rim, to include Japan, but not China, and the United States. And there was a lot of hand-wringing going on about that particular agreement, and expose kind of the free traders. That's like, yeah, this is a really great idea, in part because one of the things these multinational trade agreements do is they reduce trade barriers between countries. So, for example, trade barriers could include things like economic sanctions of some sort, like tariffs, taxes on imported products. They can also be more subtle in terms of quotas, non-tariff barriers. So these multinational trade agreements are clearly a political issue because there are, historically in the United States, the Republicans have been more amenable to free trading. The Democrats, as I pointed out in the first discussion, they tend to be more pro-labor. Labor tends to oppose these trade agreements because what sometimes happens is that things that used to be made in the United States are now made in other countries and imported into the United States. So certainly one of the considerations with respect to the P of the pest, the political, is, what's a country's, or what are the philosophies of the political parties in a particular country? What are their philosophies towards international trade? We briefly mentioned some economic stuff, but we'll look at two economic issues, the first of which will be gross domestic product. You might remember from your economics course that gross domestic product refers to the value of all goods and services produced in an economy in a particular period of time. And what we're looking at from a marketing perspective are a couple of things. First of all, we're looking at gross domestic product in a country. And so, for example, the United States, in terms of countries, the United States has the largest gross domestic product of any particular country, although China is catching up, and China is likely to surpass the United States perhaps within the next 10 years in terms of gross domestic product. And we also look at something called gross domestic product per capita, which is basically where you take the gross domestic product and you divide it by the number of people in a particular country. So and this is not meant to bash China, but China has a growing gross domestic product as well as a growing gross domestic product per capita. But because there's so many people that live in China, China's gross domestic product per capita is much less than in the United States. To be fair, the United States does not have the largest gross domestic product per capita. It has a high gross domestic product per capita, but not the highest of all countries in the world. And why marketers are concerned about this is because gross domestic product per capita can be a nice, can give organizations an indication of what kinds of products might or might not sell in a particular market. And that leads us directly into a discussion of another economic topic, which refers to the so-called bottom of the pyramid, or BOP. And you got to be careful when you use acronyms in business because, as I pointed out in the initial discussion, acronyms, sometimes there are multiple acronyms, multiple similar acronyms or the same acronyms that can mean different things. So, for example, you might have heard of BOP in your econ classes, and that would stand in some cases for balance of payments. BOP can also stand for bottom of the pyramid. And there's not total agreement on the bottom of the pyramid. Excuse me. Refreshment. But bottom of the pyramid either refers to people who live on $2 a day, or $4 a day. So we're talking, basically economically, challenged people that don't have a lot of money. And that has, really important implications from a marketing perspective, and that's what we're going to talk about when we look at the marketing mix at the end of this discussion. We're going to focus on the marketing mix from the perspective of the bottom of the pyramid. Okay, so socioculture, there's a lot of stuff associated with socioculture. One of the things I'd like to talk about is something called the self-reference criterion, or the SRC. And the SRC refers to an unconscious reference to one's environment, culture, knowledge, and using these as a kind of a basis for decision making. So again, an unconscious reference to one's environment, culture, knowledge, and using them as a basis for decision making. Let me give you an example. Okay, so at the end of 2004, I taught in November and December. I taught MBA courses at the Peking University in China. And every morning I went to breakfast at one of the restaurants that was on campus. And they had a breakfast buffet. This breakfast buffet was unlike any breakfast buffet that you've probably experienced if you've gone to a breakfast buffet in the United States, in the sense that while there were a lot of different products there, the products that were at the breakfast buffet at Peking University University were warm vegetables, multiple kinds of rice, fish, and soup. And I bring up soup because every morning when I went in and had my breakfast, what I would hear was a number of people just slurping their soup, literally, like that. And, I know when I was growing up, if I slurped my soup, my mom would knock me upside the head, probably twice. But what you have to recognize is that in many cultures, slurping soup is not considered to be bad manners. Rather, slurping soup is a recognition that the person is enjoying what it is that they are consuming. So the self-reference criterion, I mean, if you sit there and you go, slurping soup is bad, slurping soup is bad, slurping soup is bad, and then you're confronted with slurping soup, you can see how misinterpretations can occur, particularly with respect to self-reference criteria, okay? So technology, there's a lot of stuff we could talk about with technology. We'll look briefly at the internet, and the internet actually provides a nice potential example of self-reference criteria. If you've grown up in Western cultures, you probably figured that everybody has access to the internet. Well, there's actually a website that you can go to, Internet Usage World Statistics, and this is updated probably every 6 months. And why this is interesting is that, if you're thinking of doing business, let's say in Africa, 28% of the African population has access to the internet. 87% of North American population has access to the internet. So again, you have to think about these things, and why we talk about the pest stuff is because if you're a marketer, remember, you're thinking about stuff in terms of marketing mix, or the 4 P's of marketing. So for example, with respect to product, and if we look at the bottom of the pyramid, and I'll give you a real life example. So in 2009, I went to Nicaragua as part of an immersion trip through John Carroll University, and we stayed in a place in Managua, which is the capital of Nicaragua. And one of the Sunday nights that I was there, I went to a house that was a couple of doors down, and this house was actually, not only was it a living area for people, but they also kind of ran a really small convenience store out of the front of it from, let's say, 6 until 10 a couple of nights a week. And one of the things that I noticed was that the Sunday night I was there was a young lady who walked up, and she bought one tampon. Yeah, one tampon, not a box of tampons, one tampon. And that's one of the things when you start talking about the bottom of the pyramid and you start thinking about the marketing mix associated with the bottom of the pyramid. By definition, people in the bottom of the pyramid don't have a lot of money. And so price becomes a very important component of the marketing mix. And so one of the things that marketers do when they're dealing with bottom of the pyramid customers is they will sometimes adjust the size or quantity of the products, and people will only buy things that they actually need and that they can afford. So we've kind of killed 2 birds with one stone with respect to the product and the price. Similarly, the place is, you might see something like, you think about in the neighborhoods that you live in, it's very unlikely that anybody's house or apartment, they're using it as a convenience store a couple of days a week. So what you would see is some alternate distribution, alternate retailing strategies as well. And then promotion is the 4th P that we can look at. And if you don't have a lot of money, right, you might not have a lot of electronic devices. You might not have access to a computer. You might not have access to an internet. You might not have access to a TV. You might not be able to read. So how are you going to communicate with these people? Do you use pictures? Do you use word of mouth? Do you use billboards? So again, what we've done, and the clock on the wall is telling me I'm almost at 20 minutes, so I need to stop, is we've given a quick overview of multinational or international marketing. We've looked at the macro environmental considerations, and we've also given a brief discussion of the marketing mix. See ya, bye.